Are you pushing forward towards your goal? But rather than embracing that journey, it's causing more stress for you. You're focused more on getting in alignment with what other people are expecting from you. You're starting to lose track of who you really are. And you wonder if you're ever going to make it to the other side. So many of us are living by the prescriptions that are set by society and others around us. That is what we're talking about today. We are talking about how you can break free from the standard prescriptions and write your own script to success. I'm Clara Capano, and this is Women Winning Their Way. Welcome to another episode of Women Winning Their Way. I am so excited to dive into today's conversation, and I am pleased to welcome our guest, Monica Packer. Monica, welcome to the show.
I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Clara.
Anytime. So, Monica, before we dive in and start getting into the meat of everything, why don't you just briefly introduce yourself to the group?
As you said, I'm Monica. I live in the Salt Lake area. We came from the Bay Area. We lived there for 13 years and we have 5 kids, and people primarily know me online as a podcaster and a personal development coach.
Mm-hmm.
So everything is about progress, where we focus on progress outside of perfectionism.
Absolutely. We just got to keep moving forward and have that growth experience. So let's go ahead and dive in. The first question I want to ask you is, the title of the show is Women Winning Their Way. When you hear that, what does that even mean to you?
To me, and I'm so glad I had a chance to think on this, but my initial thought is still what I keep coming back to. And it's that there are so many prescriptions out there in every way. Now, I'm in the personal development world, but I'm also an entrepreneur. And I see those prescriptions abound in the personal development space, but also in the business space about what is the right way to do something. And in both worlds, for me, I have learned it's not about finding the right prescription. It's about making your own prescription. And I think this is something we as women have opportunities to do in really unique ways, but also honestly, some natural gifts that can be stuffed down so much because we are so easily in male-centered spaces. So that's my initial thought. It's just like us making our own prescriptions and doing it our way, which will be different.
Exactly. So building on that, tell us about maybe your journey. When was a time where you had to maybe pivot and let go of an old prescription and create your own?
I don't know about you, Clara, but I grew up in a family that had a stay-at-home mom. I'm one of 7 kids. And I was actually just talking about this with my podcast manager last night. Like growing up, we only knew women who either were full-time stay-at-home moms or women who were full-time working outside the home. There wasn't a mix of both.
Right.
And I was a teacher. I was a middle school teacher before I had kids. And I still carried on some like working hours as a piano teacher. And I also helped teach student teachers how to teach. Kind of funny. But I still felt this side of me that just needed more than just the pure way that I had seen being a stay-at-home or the primary parent. And so that came along maybe about 8 or 9 years ago. So for me, that was a big shift, just a big pivot in my life of prioritizing. It doesn't even start with the business. It started with prioritizing myself in new ways than I had before, about allowing myself to bring back parts of myself to my life again, my own interests, my own hobbies. And along the way came about my podcast, which has been such a big gift. And what's so fascinating about that is one of the biggest parts I had to bring back about myself was my ambition. I feel like that was something I always had as a kid. Like I was that kid going door to door and selling popcorn balls, or being outside of my house and trying to get people to stop to look at my art, or I wanted to be in all the leadership positions. I was always trying to go for the honor roll, like the big things that people could see. And in my early, actually when I turned 20, I had a pretty big life altering wall of realizing that I was not safe in my own body because of eating disorders. That ambition led to some hard things in my life. But then the next 10 years, that ambition was not only put on a shelf, it was like stuffed down deep inside me as something that was bad
Yeah.
because it only led to bad things to
Right.
me.
Absolutely. And I think you hit on something very important here because I think in many ways, being overly ambitious can come back and bite us. For me, I also did have an eating disorder. And again, a lot
Yeah.
of it was from my A type personality, but
Mhm.
also my divorce. I was
Mm.
so ambitious. It was perceived that I wasn't there enough for my child. I wasn't there enough for my family, uh,
Mm.
and looking at those. So I think sometimes as women, we get chastised at the same time, we're told to be ambitious. And there's this huge
Yeah.
paradox, I think, out there of telling us to do one thing. And then the actions that come about when we do that is just the opposite. Have you experienced that in maybe any of the other people you've talked to with your show or even just in your life?
Yes, I think it's like we talked about at the beginning, is because we're trying to follow this all or nothing model that we
Mhm.
think in order to be ambitious, we have to do it in these XYZ ways, and ways that are not even in alignment with our own values and how we want to live our lives.
Yeah.
And that was really a big lesson for me as I brushed off my ambitious side and I reconnected with the side of me that wanted to grow something
Mhm.
outside of myself and to do something with it. But I had to learn how to do it in a new way, outside of the all or nothing way. So
Mhm.
that way I still felt like I wasn't riding that pendulum swing of
Right.
going from all to nothing. And as part of that, going back to the stay-at-home mom thing, I paving our own path, it's going to look different for every person. But for me, what felt good was to not really be either. It was more to be both.
Yeah.
So I'm still the primary caretaker for our kids, but I also work part time from home. And that's been a good balance for me. But it's been nice to bring back that ambitious side of me and to do it my way.
Yeah. Do you have any other ideas or maybe suggestions? Because I think this idea of all or nothing is a theme that I see with so many women. And if they can't give it all, they feel like a failure or just want to do it. And you brought up a really great example. You can still work, yet you're working part-time, you're working in the home. So you can still go after your ambitious side and fulfill that need for the career and still be there for your family. Are there other things that are examples of how you can still be ambitious and give your all without having it be all or nothing?
I think you can give us a goal that you've had and you can apply this. And honestly, I think it's almost like anywhere you can apply this, that the when we're given those prescriptions of all or nothing, really what we are missing is that there is a price being paid.
Mhm.
And if we are aware of the prices that we are potentially paying and making choices to better navigate it, then we can do it in a way where we are doing it our way. Because you do see people do the all version and they can be extremely successful, but what we miss is the cost.
Right.
And that's not often on display. I think of just any person who has rise to meteoric success. Like right now, I'm thinking of Chapel Roan. I love her music. And she worked for many years before she suddenly hit a big upswing and like overnight success in terms of how big she's become. But she's also paying dearly with her mental health and she's being honest about that, which I so appreciate that she can do that. And that's not to say like she did it wrong. Sometimes life is like that. Sometimes like your success comes at a such a pace that it's hard to keep up, and you are paying those prices in ways that you didn't even have the chance to be intentional about it. But that's just something I think we can all think of as, who do you know has met this goal that you wanted or that you think is so admirable, but do you also know the price they've paid? And
Mhm.
I think most of the time the people who haven't paid prices that they didn't want to pay is because they did it so slowly. They
Ah,
didn't have the overnight success. They got there small win by small win.
yeah.
And that's kind of what I'm banking on in my life and in my business. I'm banking on the small wins building over time. So
Yeah.
that way I hopefully have the chance to decide the prices I'm willing to pay.
Yeah. I also sometimes wish people would be more open on sharing the price that they paid to make it real so others that are following in the path can have a baseline for it. Because I think you're absolutely
Yeah.
right. We only see the highlight reel. We only see what people show us, which is the end
Hmm.
result. We don't see the path. And I think if people, are doing that to get up and say, I did this and look what I lost because of it. Just so again, we have more of a reference place to be able to check in for ourselves. What do you think about that?
Oh, I wish it were way more common.
Yeah.
And this is something, it's so hard because I mean that's partly what like we do out there, both on your LinkedIn page and on Instagram or even with your friends. It's hard to share like, hey, this is what I got to, but this is how long it took me to get there.
Mhm.
This is one of the reasons why I think we need to stop doing the 30 under 30 lists. I would love way more stories about people who are later on in their years and getting to the success points that they have been working towards for decades, or people who have uncovered all like huge parts of themselves that they didn't even know they had.
Yeah.
Like, I saw this recently on Instagram and I saved it just so I could reference it. But a woman in her 90s who suddenly picked up painting and turns out she's really good. and
Mhm.
and her paintings are selling for a ton of money. Not that it has to always be, about money, but yeah, I wish, that's where I feel like you and I and the women who are listening, we bear that responsibility
Mhm.
to do it differently than it was done before and how it was modeled before. I think women had to show just that perfect side in order to compete in the worlds that they were in, to try to
Mhm.
work to break the glass ceiling. And now we're kind of seeing we have a lot of work to do all over, overall we have a lot of work, but maybe part of that work is showing the struggle or
Right.
the time or the toil or the price is being paid.
Yeah. Two things came up when you mentioned that. One is Julia Louis Dreyfus. She
Oh,
has
I
her
love her.
podcast, Smarter
Yeah.
Than Me. And it's exactly that. She's interviewing, women in their
Hmm.
late 70s, 80s, and 90s to learn these lessons. And I think it's just so beautiful. And then also, when you talk about the 30 under 30, it's so funny. I actually just received an email yesterday that I'm being nominated for a 40 over 40. And it's
Fantastic.
exactly that. And I'm like, we need more of those. And yeah,
We
80
do.
over 80 and, just doing these things so that we can learn. And I just think, it's a really good point. We have to really start telling the truth and using it as a place of strength and a teaching moment for everybody else and the younger generation.
Hmm. Hmm.
And speaking of the younger generation, I want to go back into the idea of you being a teacher. And I think you said you were in the middle school
Yeah.
area.
Hmm.
So talk about a prime time for young girls. I mean, young
Yeah.
boys too, gender non-specific, whatever, just for the young minds. They are so moldable, and I think this is just my perception, so much pressure on them. When we're
Yeah.
talking about the prescription, they're getting it from their parents, they're getting it from the school, they're getting it from social media. Everywhere, every side, every place that they look, they are being told what they need to be. So, how can we do a better job of empowering the younger generation to not feed into this and start younger of doing it their way?
Hmm. I'm so glad that we're thinking of this. I think that's honestly half the battle is,
Mhm.
are we even being aware of the pitfalls that they can be experiencing in all of this that we were just brought up. So yeah, awareness, honestly, but I think in action, it's a healthy mix of modeling and transparency. Like, so modeling the struggle, modeling a failure that you experience, model a disappointment, model the perseverance, but also be transparent and talk about it. Like, and I think even transparency is often best done through stories.
Yeah.
So, talking to your kid about a time that you failed or a big disappointment you had. I just had a chance to do that with my 13-year-old daughter who just ran for president in her class. And she got 2 votes
Mhm.
in her class, which was so disappointing for
Right.
her, hugely disappointing. And I got to tell her about this time that it was between me and another girl for the lead in the musical that was like made for me. It was 42nd Street for the record. And I was a dancer and a singer and all that stuff. And I didn't get it. and just how hard that was for me to work through it. But being able to connect more with her, I didn't, just have to tell her, these things happen. And when they happen, you do this. It's kind of the story could lead more to the lessons, in addition to them hearing about the disappointments I've had with my work, which have been bountiful.
Right. Exactly. And I think, you hit on something really important because, there's this fine line of, guiding our younger generation and being friends with them. And, I'm not there to be my son's friend. I am there
Yeah.
to guide him. And I think there is a lot of power in being able to share these stories and, letting them know I'm a real human being too. And, this is what
Hmm.
it did. I remember, my son was talking about reflecting on some of the successes that his father and I have had, and being like that look how long that took. That didn't
Hmm.
happen in our 20s.
Yeah.
In our 20s we were doing the crap jobs to build the foundation for where we are now in our 50s. And
Yeah.
just really having that as a perspective. And even when they make mistakes, these are some of the mistakes that I did even as a teenager. And I think it's a really important thing, and I just think we have to be so careful to not put these prescriptions in there. I wish we could in many ways shut down social media, because I think so many of it are falsities. And I think,
Yes.
again, really having those real conversations. I also think maybe even sharing stories of other successful people, having children start to read biographies of some of the greats and
Yeah.
failures that they've had along the way, just to let them know that these people that they emulate. And hearing more from young actors and sports people again on the work that it took to get there.
And one of the things I think this conversation is pinpointing is the importance of failure,
Hmm.
right? To help them see, like, when you fail, it's not because you're doing it wrong, you're actually doing it right. Failure is not just part of the process, it's an important part of the process. There are
Hmm.
opportunities for us to learn from them, and to not make them mean necessarily something about us,
Right.
which I actually had another opportunity to do that this year because my 11-year-old joined a comp baseball team, and he was late in the game because I, not being a sports person, didn't know that there was anything past rec league. And when he expressed desire to play baseball year round, and then I realized, oh, we are super behind in getting you in a comp team. And we finally found one. And he's been there for a year. And out of like the 50, maybe 60 games they've played, they have won two. And it has been a brilliant opportunity for my son,
Hmm.
who's kind of a born perfectionist, because he's had to learn how to fail.
Yeah.
And weirdly, being on a losing team over and over has really strengthened his confidence over
Mm.
the past year. I was so glad they ended the season with finally having a win, just because I'm like, we do need to experience like just
Mhm.
that moment. But that moment was all the grander for them, right?
Right.
And now he's trying out for other teams and stuff like that. But that's what he needed to learn. He needed to learn how to fail. And I'm so glad
Absolutely.
he had that experience.
I know it is. And it hurts so bad going through it. And you don't see it until you're on the other side. Many, even sometimes it's many years ahead of time. I heard a
Yeah.
quote this morning that I loved, and it was, none of us are born knowing how to walk. And it's
Mhm.
that idea, it's
Yeah.
no business has overnight success.
Yeah.
No person has overnight success. And, really doing that. I was listening to a podcast this morning with Tom Hanks, and they were just kind of being like, everything you do turns to gold. He's like, well, now he's like, you
Yeah.
didn't see, you never see the failures that I had before the very first success. Nobody pays
Yeah.
attention to those. And, we have to, I think, just always remind ourselves. And I think, one of the things that was a great gift to me was one of my mentors, really encouraged us to talk about them. She actually wouldn't let us call them mistakes. We had to call them golden moments, because it was,
Mm.
what did you learn from it?
Oh, that's such a good example of that.
Yeah.
And I was even thinking about I'm just about to reach 8 years of my podcast. And as part of that, I was referencing one of the earlier episodes, and it was 9 months in when I thought I was a real pro. And I was listening to it and just rolling because of how terrible it was. And it was good perspective for me to see how far I've come, but also how long it took to get there. It
Mhm.
was kind of validating because I do get defeated over it. I do feel disappointed. I want the overnight success. Like, I've learned enough now. Can I have the overnight success?
Yeah.
But when I look back and see like how much I have grown and how the success is so much greater, like in that episode, I was thrilled that I had 43 reviews, like, because I just asked for reviews, and now it's like so much greater. And
Mhm.
it took time, and it was hard won. So it's been good perspective builder for me.
Yeah, and I think that's such a really good lesson for anyone that's working. It is so easy for us. We do business plans. We're constantly thinking about our goals. We've got to achieve more. We've got to go further. We've got to get this. That we forget to stop and reflect on how far we've come. And
Hmm.
I think really bringing that in, I try to do that every week when I do my weekly plan for the upcoming week. I try to first start with a review because I think it's really important and, losing sight of we really have grown. Because again,
Yeah.
it happens so slowly for us that we
Mm.
don't see it. I think about, my son had one year where he grew several inches.
Mm.
For me, I didn't notice it as much because I saw him every day. But, when he went back to school in the fall, the teachers were like, oh my God, is that Nicholas? Because he had grown
Yeah.
so much. It's the same thing. We sometimes forget when it's in front of us so much.
Hmm. And
Yeah.
that's one of the hardest parts of sticking with anything is
Mhm.
believing in and practicing the process of small wins building over time. If we don't believe the process exists, we're going to keep shooting for that overnight success, which means we are going to pay the prices we didn't choose to pay. But
Exactly.
if we believe that that's what the process looks like, then we're going to be able to practice it better and sit in that messy middle better and longer as needed to get to where we want to be or
Exactly.
hold a direction, because that's kind of part of what the failures do is they pivot, they help us pivot in needed ways.
Absolutely. So, Monica, tell us a little bit about your podcast.
So it's a personal development show for women who are recovering perfectionists who want to learn how to make progress in more practical and doable ways in their lives. I told you it's been around for 8 years, and it's really changed my life in so many ways. I've learned so much from it, and I've learned so much from the people that have been on the show, but just as much I've learned from the community. So it's also been a way for me to practice my entrepreneurial skills that I had back when I was going door to door and selling popcorn balls. And I've had to learn so much about business and website building and course building and marketing. And it's also been fun for me to brush off that ambitious side and also that teacher side in me too. I can bring in my teacher skills while I'm teaching women online. So it's been a fantastic ride.
I love it. Well, I know that even as you're doing this, you're still growing again, being a professional development, focused area there. What is next for Monica?
Ooh, that's a good question. So let's talk about something real then, because we have been saying we need to do a better job of that.
Mhm.
This year was maybe going to be my last year
Mm,
because it's been a real tough couple of years. I think everyone knows that who has any online course, and those aren't selling nearly as well as they used to be, because people's pockets like have changed what's in there and also their time and their desires to have more community. I also had a baby January of 2023, my little caboose, 5 years after my last, and that shook my life in ways that I was so happy to have him, but I did not predict how much my life would change. So 2023 was a survival year. 2024 was a make it or break it year with my business. Like I'm just trying to do whatever I can to see if it can even be viable now with the ad shifts and the
mhm,
sponsorship changes that have been going on with podcasting in particular, because I am lucky to be part of an ad network. By the way, that's all I wanted forever. And then once I finally got there, it didn't
mhm,
magically fix anything, just so people know that too. So now I'm in November of
mhm,
2024, my make it or break it year. And I'm going through the expenses. I'm going through what's incoming. I'm making predictions of next year.
mhm.
And right now, it's looking like I'm going to make it,
Nice.
but it's still pretty narrow. Like it's still like, okay, with that needs to come some pivots,
Mhm,
both to how I do my work and what I offer to people. And but in ways that feel exciting. One of the things that has come about more is I've leaned into more coaching, and it's been a real gift actually, like both for me, and I honestly feel like a surprise of how I've been coaching for 6 years, but very minimally.
mhm.
And now that seems to be more of the centerfold of my business actually in ways that I didn't think for a while. So that was a very long answer for your simple question, but
That is okay.
hopefully
Yeah.
We're practicing what we preach here.
That's exactly what we have to do. And to see again that it's a journey. So I appreciate you sharing. And we're going to put all of your information in the show notes. So, for those of you watching, let's listen to the podcast, especially those that are recovering perfectionists and,
Yeah.
really lean in and see what we can do. So, Monica, I have one last question for you. I've really enjoyed our conversation today. Sitting where you sit today, going on this journey, learning everything you've learned, how do you define success for yourself now?
Success to me is feeling like myself.
Beautiful.
That really is it. I mean, those years that I really struggled as the overachieving perfectionist and then as the underachieving perfectionist, I was paying those prices to both sides of that pendulum swing in ways that basically could be summed up as I wasn't me.
Yeah.
And now I'm striving, I'm working, I'm growing, but I'm also trying to do it in reasonable ways. And I haven't gotten to those milestones I necessarily would like to yet, but I feel successful. And it's because I feel like myself.
Love that. Ah, so beautiful. Well, Monica, thank you so much. I appreciate you sharing time today. Your messages of, really just loving who you are, embracing it, the idea that you can write your own prescription and you can be the creator of your story. I just think is so beautiful and is going to be so helpful. So I appreciate you being here and sharing with us today.
It was a true joy. I love your community and the work that you're doing. So thanks so much.
I really enjoyed that conversation. There were so many things that came up for me. This idea of, perfectionism and trying to live this prescription, which is exactly why I started the show. I wanted to start the show to make sure that we're having real conversations about how we don't have to live by those prescriptions, by those standards that others set for us, because I think it causes so much stress. I love when Monica talked about just allowing yourself to be you, and then how she wrapped it all up. And at the end, when I asked her what her definition of success was, it was being herself and loving who she is. And I think that that's so true, because I think many times we wear all these different hats and we sometimes lose or forget who we really are. And so living in your own prescription and writing the story and the chapter that's going to work best for you allows you to live and be you. I love the idea of going after the small wins, and knowing that it's slow and steady and that they build up over time. I thought one of the most powerful things she talked about is the price. Really looking at what is it you want to do and what is going to be the cost to get there. And I'm not saying it's not going to be worth the cost. You have to weigh that for yourself. Looking back, even through my divorce, I don't like that it cost me a marriage. At the same time, staying in the marriage would have cost me myself. So you have to look at these things and decide for yourself, are you willing to pay the cost? Because nothing comes for free. There is always a cost. So looking at your path to success, your goals, because it could be that that goal needs to be set aside until you are willing to pay that cost. So looking at those, and just again, a message that we've talked about time and time again, this idea that failure is part of life and we need to embrace what she called the messy middle. So I hope that you found a lot of value. I hope that you can go and give yourself a pat on the back, give yourself a little bit of grace, take a moment and stop. And rather than going and diving into looking forward, take a moment and give yourself some grace and focus on where you have come, because I guarantee you've come a long way, baby. I'm Clara Capano. Thank you so much for being here for another episode of Women Winning Their Way. Please make sure to share this episode, like it, rate the show, so we can continue to share all these great messages on a global level. Stay tuned. Until next time.